as a business owner or as a leader in a service business, there's all kinds of technical stuff that you can focus on, and that's obviously going to be necessary. But I think that the leadership and the culture side are going to be what create that environment for the people around you to grow.
Chad Peterman here, and you are listening to Can't Stop the Growth, a platform for leaders and teams to grow and thrive. We highlight the importance of personal development, pursuing greatness, and always chasing your potential. Let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Can't Stop the Growth. I'm your host, Chad Peterman, and today we are going to dive into a topic that we talk about often. How do we create cultures which breed leadership? How do we create leaders which reinforce the culture that we're wanting to build within our own companies? And how do we continue to scale that? So we have an awesome guest on the podcast today who has written a number of books that I've found out in doing my research. Excited to talk about his latest book, What Effective Leaders Do, along with the rest of the books that he has written and the advice that he gives businesses and other leaders on being effective leaders. So without further ado, would like to welcome Mr. Sean Glaze to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Sean.
Thanks so much, Chad. Really excited for our conversation. Hoping I can share something valuable for your listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. Reading through and doing a little bit of prep, I have no doubt that you will be able to. I guess before we get started, maybe give our listeners a little bit of your background, kind of how you got into kind of the leadership space and so on and so forth.
I think that is always the most interesting question to start with in any conversation when you meet somebody, because how you got here is never a straight line, right? And so for me, I never expected to be a leadership speaker, team building facilitator, trainer, coach for organizations. I was going to be an attorney, and I did not get into University of Georgia Law School and was heartbroken, had a degree in English, and I ended up falling into teaching English at the high school that I graduated from. While I was teaching English that first year, my wife's in nursing school. We're kind of long distance relationship. She was down at Georgia Southern. And so I wanted to keep myself busy. So I ended up coaching 4 sports. I did cross country. I was kind of arm twisted into coaching basketball. And then I did soccer. And I ended up picking up tennis because the tennis coach went on maternity leave. So not a very, kind of common way to kind of get started, but I wanted to stay busy, and I was going to reapply and go to law school after that first year. And I remember having that long distance call. There was no FaceTime or Zoom back then. And I'm telling my fiance, now wife, I think I know where I'm supposed to be, because by Thanksgiving of that year, I'd fallen in love with the classroom, fallen in love with the locker room. And it was actually as a basketball coach that I ended up kind of focusing and then ultimately kind of building programs as a coach and a leader, and realizing that that culture is always a symptom of leadership. And the things that I had failed at as a young leader were the things that you learn, kind of give you the opportunity to turn programs around later on. And those same things that helped us be better with basketball help absolutely leaders be better in business.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we had a guest on a couple of weeks back who was also a basketball coach. And I come from a long sports background, played high school, college, and all the such. But, I think it's, to your point, it's like looking back on the coaches that I had. When you're 17, 18 years old, you really don't, it's not like, oh, yeah, he's a really good leader. It's like, well, he's my coach. What did you learn, coaching young people that has translated so well into, training, professional organizations and, adults and different stuff like that? Like, what have you seen that's like, it's the same, whether it's high school kids or it's, leaders at a, Fortune 500 company?
That was an incredible aha moment for me when I began to realize that leadership and culture and teamwork translate across industries. It's not just a basketball thing. It's not any specific industry of business, because people are people, and the same issues that we had with people in our locker room are the issues that your listeners and your business owners and your leaders have with their people every single day, every single week. And those things that caused us to underachieve when I was a first year head coach are the things that you look in the mirror and you realize if the team's going to be better, if our results are going to be better, I need to be better. And that began after a disastrous first year as a head coach. We only won 5 games, and I knew that our talent was better than that. I knew that I needed to do something different. And so it kind of goes back to, what are the 3 ways you grow as a leader? Well, it's reflection and it's feedback and it's coaching. And the first thing was reflection. And then it was asking my assistant coach and some parents and some coaches that I admired about some feedback. And then actually getting some coaching as a young leader myself, so that somebody asked me questions that I wouldn't have asked myself otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful because I think it's, when the team doesn't get the results because the players are doing the work, or if you're in a, work environment, when the people aren't doing the work, it's very easy to cast blame upon them as opposed to looking in the mirror and understanding how we can be better ourselves.
We learn through our failures early on, and hopefully we share as a little bit wiser and grayer leaders with those people kind of coming behind us, how to dodge and navigate around the potholes that we stumbled over. And that's really what I've done is, I took my teaching career where it was mostly American and British literature, and I really transitioned. I'm still a teacher. I think that what you do in your podcast and when you're working with leaders, that heart of a teacher is just, I've changed curriculum and I've changed my audience. But it really is, how do you teach people and help them with insights and tactics and tools and resources so they can be better in their role? And again, those same things that made us good as a team in a basketball locker room are the exact same things. And I think that culture is absolutely the single most important job of a leader. Culture is going to always be a symptom of leadership. And I think that the problem that I had as a young coach, Chad, is the problem that a lot of leaders have, even established leaders, is that they see that their success is really based on 2 things, which is talent and system, right? And everybody is in the talent acquisition business. You want to have good people in your organization. And everybody has a strategy, their X's and O's that they want people to implement and execute. And that's what I focused on my very first year when we really underperformed. And I realized that 3rd element is culture. And so that's when I started really focusing upon, what are those things that establish culture? Because culture is nothing more than the behaviors that you see in your organization. So how do you change behaviors and make sure that you establish standards and understanding and clarity about what's going to make you successful and ultimately us as a team that much more profitable?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's dive into your latest book here. What effective leaders do. I took some time to read through kind of the core principles of it, and I think that there's a ton of great stuff within that. I guess before we start, what was kind of the inspiration behind this particular book?
Well, I think that as I evolved as a speaker and trainer, you see the books that I provided ended up kind of evolving as well. The first was Rapid Teamwork. What are those 5 areas of culture that leaders need to focus on? And I used the cheesy acronym of GREAT to really focus upon any leader that wants a better culture is going to focus on goals and relationships and expectations and accountability and thanks. And every leader is going to be really good at 1 or 2 of those. But most every leader that I've coached or worked with has probably neglected 1 or 2 of those as well. And again, it's where's that reflection come in? What's the area of culture that I need to be more intentional about focusing on? And then I realized that if that's going to be kind of a blueprint for leaders to use to build a culture where their talent can actually, thrive in implementing their strategy, the next thing was, okay, well, when I'm invited to talk to 600 frontline employees, what's the message for them? And that ultimately came back to how do we build our athletes into not just better players, but into better teammates? And that was the 10 commandments of winning teammates. What are those things that people do, regardless of technical skill, that make them valuable and productive as team members in any organization? And you've worked with somebody, and one of the questions I'll ask oftentimes, Chad, and I'll ask your audience, who's the best team member you ever had? Who's the best teammate you ever worked with? And nobody ever points to Susie or Joe because they were good at Excel. They point at somebody because of interpersonal skills, not because of technical skills. And then I would get asked, with the 10 commandments of winning teammates, of these 10 kind of areas of growth or categories of focus for our people, what do you think is the most important? And I used to say taking personal responsibility for team results, because you want people to be owners and to see the impact they have. And I eventually shifted that answer to staying coachable. I think that if people are willing to be coachable and to grow and improve and be relentless in their own improvement, then the organization can't stop the growth, right? And so that idea of staying coachable, and how do you get not just people, but leaders first to stay coachable so they're not closed-minded and making assumptions. And then the last book, which again, you mentioned, you're wonderful to have me on to talk about what effective leaders do, is ultimately that last part of the puzzle, I think, to build a sticky culture, which is, once you have people who are great teammates and they want to stay coachable, what's going to happen if you grow your organization is you're going to have really good people that are great at a specific skill, whether it's sales or painting or heating and air, whatever that is that they're really good at and they've demonstrated an excellence in. Then we ask them to be managers. And that's a completely different set of skills than what they did technically. And so what effective leaders do is really, again, a parable, because all my books are stories, that hopefully helps to lay out the 4 most important lessons that somebody as an emerging or even an established leader can be reminded of or can discover to make them more effective in their role.
Well, I'd probably need to buy a couple of copies of your book as we continue to grow. I think that's the one thing, in taking complete ownership of it. It's, I think, from even a leader's perspective, trying to develop people who have never really led before
Mhm.
it's like, where in the heck do I start? Like,
Mhm.
I feel like as a leader, some of it is like, after you've been doing it for a while, it's like, well, a lot of it's kind of like feel, like I just kind of feel this, or, this is kind of how I navigate these situations.
Mhm.
Other than buy the book, what what kind of advice do you for leaders who are in charge of developing these other leaders within their organization? Kind of like, what are some tips for them as far as kind of navigating that if they don't really know where to start?
I think that, and this is obviously part of the book as well, but I think that ultimately our evolution of leaders, and this is kind of the third lesson that the main character learns. The evolution of leaders is, first we focus on stuff, because stuff doesn't talk back and stuff doesn't question our choices, and stuff is so when I first took over a job, I would focus on the locker room and new signs and a new couch, and I'm going to make sure I get this in my coach's office, and you focus on stuff and uniforms, and those aren't going to ever win any ball games, right? They're the peripheral stuff that are nice to have, but they're not the need to have for your people to be better in their role. And so eventually you shift from stuff to staff. And I want to make my people better. I want to grow my team. I want to make sure my players have better skills, better awareness, that my staff is better. And so we focus upon them. And you notice where my fingers are, that's on other people, because I'm fine, which again goes back to that idea of staying coachable. And I think that third level of evolution for leaders is you go from stuff to staff. And you really need to, if you want stuff to be better, you need to focus on staff. If you want staff to be better, you need to focus on yourself. And when we start to really focus upon growing ourselves as a leader, then that makes our staff and our stuff that much more successful. And I think that last level is systems. And I tell you that kind of backstory because I think that a lot of the work that you probably do in working with leaders of service businesses is helping them put in place systems. Because I think that the best coach, the best leader, the best parent, our job is to make ourselves desired but unnecessary. And I would love as a coach to know that I didn't need to say a word during a game because I had players that were being leaders that had acquired the skills and the habits that were going to make them successful. And I think it's the same way for leaders. Just as you're going to put together a system for here's what the customer experience should look like, or this is how we're going to handle X, Y, and Z, a lot of the conversation I'll have with leaders in terms of building, what does that leadership development curriculum look like as you are beginning to build people in your organization? And I think there's always going to be the interpersonal stuff that sometimes gets overlooked, but really has a huge impact upon everything else that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a great point, and one that I think often gets overlooked is that to develop others, we must develop ourselves. And I always tell people, your organization will grow at the rate at which you grow. And you set kind of that cultural cadence of, what does growth look like? How intentional are we going to be about it? So on and so forth. And so I think that point is at least for me hits home, of something I've tried to emulate. I don't always get it perfect, and always have to remind myself to keep getting better and to keep learning and growing.
As a business owner or as a leader in a service business, there's all kinds of technical stuff that you can focus on, and that's obviously going to be necessary. But I think that the leadership and the culture side are going to be what create that environment for the people around you to grow. And ultimately, I think that we need to, just like we give our people grace for the mistakes that they're ultimately going to make as they try and improve. We need to give ourselves grace. I think a whole lot of building confidence as a leader. Again, I'm kind of getting into the fourth lesson here, but the growth of confidence as a leader isn't about fake it until you make it. It's about be willing to fail it until you nail it type of thing. It's give yourself grace to have that one-on-one conversation that needs to happen every week or two, for those first ones to be a little bit awkward, because you need to be willing to be bad long enough to get better. I think confidence is built on a foundation of competence, and competence starts with the courage to be bad first so that you can actually improve. And I think that for leaders, that willingness to not have to be perfect in front of their people, to be vulnerable enough to acknowledge, hey, this is something I think is really important for us as an organization to be more successful, to adapt or to adopt in order to be better for this with our clients. But I've not done it before either, and I'm going to need your help to X, Y, and Z. So these are the first steps. And again, I think laying that out and framing that so that you don't have to be the all-knowing kind of Yoda in front of the people that know that you're maybe not that, but they absolutely trust and want you to be authentically yourself.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's such a great point. And being in the trades business, it's a very proud business. Tradespeople and the skills that they've acquired over the years and everything. And I think one of the things we try to preach as much as possible is it's okay not to have all the answers. Like it's perfectly fine. Like you're actually a better leader if you don't. Now we want you to have some. That's why you're there, to answer questions. But it can be a more collaborative approach,
Mhm.
and it's okay to learn something. And, you don't have to have seen everything and done everything, because again, that makes you less vulnerable and less relatable.
Mhm.
And people want to follow people that are relatable, that are going through similar things or maybe had a similar experience and things of that nature. One of the things that you talk about is culture is shaped one conversation at a time. And you mentioned that just a moment ago about, having that one-on-one conversation. One-on-ones are a huge emphasis for us around here. It's my belief that's where we actually make breakthroughs. It's not in a, weekly meeting or, a group setting or whatever it may be. Um, Tell me a little bit about how you believe that like leaders can do a better job at these, make the most out of them, whatever that may be. How can they get better? Because these are not the easiest things to do,
Not at all.
for sure. So what advice would you have for leaders that are maybe struggling with having that one-on-one conversation, being vulnerable with their teammates?
Well, two things that I'm sure that you have a fantastic template and kind of structure that you share through some of your programs. I make a lot of different resources available on my website. If you go to just toolboxstuff.com, they can sign up and get access to over 60 different handouts and other resources and tools that they can use to build their team and to improve their leadership. But I think specifically in terms of meetings, meetings are absolutely necessary and unbelievably valuable, and can sometimes be painful if they're not led well. And so that idea of seeing weekly meetings as having the purpose of clarity and alignment, and having those one-on-one meetings when it's not the entire group, having those one-on-one meetings be an opportunity for connection and coaching. And I think if you're clear about what is the purpose, what do we want to accomplish with the meeting, um, in the weekly meeting, yeah, you want to make sure that you are celebrating when you've seen values lived out. because you want to make sure you're continuing to give examples of what does that value look like when we're dealing with a coworker or a client. You want to make sure that you are asking questions so that they're actually providing input. So it's not just an information waterfall that could have been an email, but you're really getting the contribution of people so they feel that their perspective is valuable. And I think that when you get into the one-on-one, it's far more focused upon how can I connect with and understand their circumstances and their challenges and their needs and their desires better, and then coaching them through, what's something that's gone well this week, what's something that you're struggling with, what's something I can connect you to as a resource, what's going on with your mom or your dad or your kid or your dog or your hobby or whatever that might be. But ultimately, how can I serve and support you to make sure that you feel comfortable going out and doing what is required for you to actually perform for our team? And I think that, again, that willingness to be vulnerable and to build personal, caring relationships so people feel like they matter beyond just the role that they're serving is pretty powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. We were talking about that. We have weekly leadership training every Tuesday at 8:30, and the topic today was speaking with candor, and how to do that effectively. We always hear the term, you just got to be brutally honest. Well, sort of, but there's a way to go about it. But we were talking about that, and I think it talks to your point about you have to be able to share your feelings and also invite whoever you're leading's feelings into the conversation as well. It's not simply about just sitting there and telling them they're doing a bad job or telling them they're doing a good job. It's understanding how they're feeling about whatever the situation may be. And then if there is an issue, how can we solve that together?
And I think that one-on-ones are a great opportunity for some of the feedback that helps us as leaders grow. What is one question you can go into that one-on-one conversation with, where you can be very pointed about asking this individual something that's going to help you be better and give you a different perspective? Hey, what's one thing that I need to know about you so that I can lead you better? Hey, what's one thing that I could do better as a leader for our team that maybe I'm not noticing? And I talk about, if you're not asking questions of your people, those moments are wasted. And I always use acronyms. Wasted is horribly misspelled, but what are you seeing that I don't? I think that you want to make sure that your meeting isn't wasted because you asked that wasted question. What are you seeing that I don't? And yet, brutal honesty is something that I coached with early on in my career. And it was probably a very undesirable and unpleasant experience from our play because I was always seeing that gap. And as leaders, we always see the gap from where we are and where we want to be. And we're always wanting to push and to drive and to close that gap. But it's progress and praise that motivates. And I've forgotten to acknowledge along the way, hey, look at how much better you're doing. Hey, great job with so-and-so. I was just, pushing and driving and, consequencing and wanting to close that gap to the point that, we stopped giving effort because there was so much negativity in me as a younger coach. And I didn't realize the importance of praise and progress and making sure that people saw the value of their efforts. And brutal honesty, people resent the brutality and then they dismiss the honesty if that's the way you go about it.
Yeah, I'm going to take that praise and progress. I like that because I think that if there's one thing that we have to always continue to remind ourselves in a growing company is to stop and smell the roses. We're doing some really, really great things.
Right.
But to your point, we're always pushing for that next level. Well, like we could have done more. We could have done more. We could have done more. We're going to do more next month. And I think it's just important to, acknowledge the efforts of the team. I was just in a meeting looking at some data and we were, data is easy to, get inundated with, but we were looking at it and we were like, oh my gosh, like that's really good. And we're like, well, hold on a second. What was it last year over that same time span? And we're like, that's like 13% better. And it's like, we didn't even know that it was better. And thus we have not praised the team to say, oh my God, look at this awesome stuff. But rather we'll probably go out there and go, well, why didn't you do more? Why didn't you figure this out? Why are we not doing even more? And I just think that's so important. And it's something, it's so weird, like in business, because like praising, celebrating, doing all that stuff is all things as humans we love to do. But in the business world, we struggle to do them. I
Oh,
don't know
they're
why
gonna
that
be
is.
soft and they're gonna stop trying if I pat them on the back
Yeah.
too much. And that was
Yeah.
absolutely the myth that I told myself as a coach is, man, if I tell them they're doing a great job, they're gonna just coast. And I think that one of the most powerful things that you find, even in looking at the research, is appreciation always leads to either maintained or improved effort. And so that idea of coasting, yep, I think that people at their heart are going to be ambitious and want to make sure that they feel that they're doing better than whatever that past was, and they want to be challenged, but they absolutely want to make sure that you are noticing and you're feeling that they matter is oftentimes driven by making sure that people see. And I'll tell the story. Appreciation and thanks is that last part of culture, and one of the most powerful things you do as a leader is to make sure that people feel seen and valued for what they've done. Because if you can be specific with your praise, and again, when you're praising, don't just praise the person, praise the behavior that led to a result, right? Thank you so much, Tom, is nowhere near as powerful as Tom, thank you so much for going over and above with doing blank for such and such. Here was the impact it had on the entire team. And that's why we as a team get to enjoy blank. I think that that's something. Now we've got something that, well, if Tom did that, man, I can do that same thing. And that goes back to really emphasizing and giving examples of those values that you want to continue to prioritize. Because as a leader, the real hold you have, especially when you have people out in the field or people who are remote or hybrid in some capacity, the goals you can clarify and then values you can clarify. And the first two things I'll work on when I'm working with leaders and teams are, what is that mission? What is that purpose that everybody can feel a part of? And then what are the values that help to become the guardrails of how do we accomplish that? What does that look like? And a company may say, we're responsive. Well, what does responsive look like to you and your team? Is that within 1 hour? Is that within 24 hours? Or is that within 1 week? What is responsive for your organization? And then how do you define that? And then how do you celebrate that in those weekly meetings so they understand, I just want to make sure I celebrate this value being lived out by, and then that ends up being something that not just as a leader, but you can invite your coworkers and your team to identify and give examples of, hey, what did you see this week that somebody did that was a great example of one of our values? Because the more you can define values by behaviors, the more real they become for your team.
Yeah. That's such a powerful thing. We have, they're like cards that, like, if one of your values is integrity, well, that
Mhm.
means something a little bit different to, you ask 10 people, you may get roughly the same answer, but you get different stuff.
Mhm.
And so these cards have what the behavior looks like and what it doesn't look like. So you
I
can
like that.
associate that with, okay, this is what integrity means.
Mhm.
And then more importantly, this is how I would actually operate with
Mhm.
integrity. So I think that's such a great point of, I think so many people plaster their values or their,
Right.
mission statement on the wall, and no one knows what in the heck it means. It's like, oh yeah, that's kind of
It's a
cool,
pretty
I guess.
poster.
Yeah. And even us, I mean, we've got to do a better job of it. Like, I've got all these things that you've brought up that I've got to go take care of because I've fallen off the horse. And it's like, hey, but what do we say at the outset? You always got to be open to growing, and getting better, which I think is why I do this. I learned so much from interviewing people like yourself, and just getting new ideas, and oftentimes not even new ideas, just a reminder that, hey,
Uh-huh.
this is important. Oh shoot, we did that. Now we don't. We've kind of fallen off. We need to get
Mhm.
back to it. So,
Yeah.
I think that's pretty powerful stuff. What are some of, because I think for me that's like, oh, everything's good, I'm doing good. What do you see as common with leaders? Like, I think assumptions are always a, critical kind of roadblock, in that we're assuming things. We're assuming everybody knows what to do. We're assuming everybody operates by the values. We're
Mhm.
assuming all of these things. What what do you see as some of those most dangerous kind of assumptions that you see leaders making that could be, kind of a pitfall for their leadership effectiveness?
I appreciate the question, Chad. And yeah, that's kind of working backwards. That's kind of the second major lesson that the main character is introduced to is that, yeah, as a leader, there's four types of assumptions or four questions that you need to ask yourself. So you're telling more productive stories because we all tell stories. Whatever role we're in, we tell a story about the client we're about to interact with. We tell a story about the person we're about to have a conversation with. We tell a story about what our role is in the organization. And I think that those end up leading sometimes to unproductive behaviors because we have assumptions we make about people and processes and things that keep us from doing our best work until we question those assumptions. And I think that those four assumptions, the first is about our purpose, and especially for leaders, when you move from an individual contributor role to a management or leadership role, that's a very different set of you know results that you need to focus on. And I think that it's really important to not make an assumption about what is your purpose, because that becomes a micromanagement situation when you end up doing somebody else's job or you kind of keep your fingers in their sandbox. And I think that being um, really clear about what is my purpose and what does success for this role look like? What are wins for me? And then helping others to then take ownership of their role as well. And then once you get past that, I think that the next thing that we make assumptions about, as you said, are absolutely those principles, those values that we want people to understand, but sometimes we don't share as much of an example or give as much clarity and examples of what those behaviors look like in our hallways or with our clients or with our coworkers and vendors. And I think that making sure that you are not assuming that people understand what those values look like, but you're giving them examples and celebrating them when they're lived out in a novel way. The next thing that I think is the assumption that we make is about those people that we work with. And this goes back to leadership is about influence, and influence happens one interaction at a time. And so my job when I'm having that conversation, even in the hallway with Susie, or I'm having a one-on-one conversation, or even having an accountability conversation with somebody, what's the story I'm telling myself before I go into that conversation? Because we've all gotten that email from Steve that says, need to talk to you today at 4. Man, can't wait to talk to Steve. Steve is wonderful. This is going to be so much fun. Man, I'm excited about 4 o'clock. And then you get the same email subject line from Liz. Oh my goodness. Liz wants to see me at 4. This is going to be hard. It's the exact same subject line, but we're telling ourselves a different story. And so we set ourselves up with a tone that might not be as productive as it might otherwise if we go in and we're curious and compassionate instead of already kind of judging. And I think that idea of, what are the stories that you're telling yourself about the people that you're working with? And again, there's a great story about, a guy goes in to a tailor. He says, man, you measure me every single day that I come in. Why is that? He said, because people aren't the same from week to week. And I think that our people are that way as well. We need to give them the opportunity to change instead of assuming they are who they were 2 years ago. And then finally, I think that sometimes the most common and dangerous assumption that we make as leaders and team members revolves around politeness. And people want to be polite because they don't want to hurt feelings. But I think that being kind is far more powerful than being polite. Politeness causes you to bite your tongue and to not say something that needs to be said for somebody to be better. And again, we've all heard the example of the broccoli in your teeth at dinner time. I would want somebody to tell me I've got broccoli in my teeth. I don't want to go for another hour and a half with that, being something that I know is bothering somebody or the people are bothered by, but I'm not aware of. And so that idea of it's kind when you are pointing out an opportunity for somebody to improve their performance. So that helps the team. And it is polite, but polite is unbelievably unproductive and sometimes cruel if you're not helping somebody to be better than they could be.
Yeah. I like that. I've never heard that before, the difference between polite and kind, but I really, really like that. I think that kind of speaks to what we were talking about this morning is being able to speak with candor. And how do you invite someone into a conversation so that you can begin to understand where they are, how they're feeling, where you can help them, so on and so forth. I think one of the things that I see, and I don't know if you've seen, I'm sure you have, as far as see this, is the ability to build confidence as a leader. And you mentioned, it's not like you just walk into the room and, huh, I'm in charge, so everybody's going to follow, and this is going to be fantastic. It takes time. And I try to communicate to our leaders that like each one-on-one is an opportunity to build trust.
Mhm.
Each meeting is an opportunity to build trust. Each text message, each email, all of these things are opportunities to build trust with your team, which is going to result in performance. Do you have any tips for leaders that are, maybe struggling with confidence, maybe a little bit self-conscious, like, I don't know if I can do this, my team's not performing, I don't feel like I got buy-in, all of those things?
Yeah, and you mentioned two things. We can address both of them, Chad, 'cause I think they're both unbelievably powerful and important for leaders to understand. The first is trust, and I think that trust and confidence can kind of be separated in a way in that trust within a team and among team members and across divisions, trust is something that is unbelievably important, and that's something you want to earn not just within your organization, but obviously out in the community as well. You want them to have trust for the brand that you're building. And I work with organizations, obviously, and part of a half day or a full day event would normally involve going through and talking about what is it that actually builds trust. And I think there's three legs. I kind of talk about trust being like a three-legged stool. And one of those is competence. Competence is trusting that somebody can do the job that they're hired to do. Now, when your customer calls, their trust in you is based upon the fact that they've seen five-star reviews. You've shown that you are able to do what they are about to hire you to do. Competence is important. But within an organization, and especially as a leader or a new team member, competence is something that we are willing to give people grace to be, again, bad long enough to get better. You don't have to be perfect. You just need to be learning and growing and improving to the point where you eventually become competent. Competence is not within an organization, not with our clients, but within an organization. Competence is not the thing that ends up kind of sabotaging trust most of the time. Most of the time, it's one of the other two legs. One of those legs is concern for others, and that is by far the most common one, where people aren't going to trust you because they don't know that you are concerned about what's best for them. And if you can demonstrate in your emails, in your conversations, that you have tried to see things from their perspective, that you have considered the impact of this new process or this new platform on what their role and their efforts and their challenges are going to be. If you can make sure that you collect enough information, that you do something special that is unique to them so they know that you're thinking about them individually instead of doing something that's just generic. I think that trust is built through concern for others, and demonstrating that is an unbelievably powerful way to build trust. And the third thing is, consistency. Are you doing and being dependable in doing the things that you said you're going to do, and getting the project in and making sure that you accomplish that uh, role, or the paperwork or the report or whatever else that is? Are you doing that consistently on time, instead of being late or showing up to a meeting late, or doing things where people don't feel like they can trust you to do that? And again, that idea of competence and concern for others, and keeping your commitments consistently, those are the things that are going to build trust. And then confidence is something I think is a little bit separate.
Yeah, no, that makes a whole lot of sense. I always tell my people doing what you say you're going to do, just a commitment to like, hey, he always gets what he says done. Yeah, he's got some rough edges. He's working on it, all of this stuff. But at least if he says he's going to do something, he does it. There's nothing worse than following somebody who's, late, not prepared, doesn't have their stuff. It's like, well, why in the heck would I follow you? Like it seems like you're a hot mess. So how do we fix that?
And how do you help people to build trust within an organization? I think, again, goes back to meetings. If clarity of values and celebrating those and making sure that you get contribution are all important parts of that. You want to end your meeting with commitments. who's going to do what by when. And I think that getting somebody to verbally say, you can count on me to take care of blank by blank, then they've actually made a promise. And actually, this is from a TED Talk or some article that I read around promises, but you can't make a promise to yourself. A promise is something that I can make to someone else, and that person ends up being an accountability partner for me when I say something out loud. And I think that building that into our meetings of who's going to do what by when, you can count on me to blank by blank, is something that now I've said it to the group or I've said it to the leader, and I know that I'm accountable for, and that absolutely builds accountability throughout the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Sean, I have to thank you for the time. This has been, as I said, I've got a couple things to go back and work on. So I'm going to get working on that. But really appreciate all the insights that you had. Congrats on all the success and the new book. I guess if listeners are interested in learning more or want to get more resources, I know you gave out the toolbox link before. Is there any other place that listeners should go to check your stuff out?
Yeah, would love for you to share it in the show notes, Chad, but
Yeah.
they can go to toolboxstuff.com. They can connect with me, obviously, on my website at Sticky Cultures or Great Results Team Building. And then obviously LinkedIn, you just look up Sean Glaze, but I would be more than happy to share whatever I can as a resource or ideas or insights that are going to help leaders to be that much better in helping their teams to thrive because they have invested in the culture that allows their people to implement the things that they want to do correctly.
No, absolutely. I really appreciate that. I love having people like yourself who it makes me feel not as crazy when I think about leadership sometimes. Like, oh, yeah, Sean, we're on the same page there. I like that. So no, but all kidding aside, appreciate all your insights, appreciate your time. Thanks for sharing and thanks for all the work that you do out there to build leaders and to create great cultures.
Enjoyed the conversation, Chad. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to connect with me personally, you can find me at chadmpeterman.com. To see what our team's up to, you can visit petermanbros.com. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel and consider joining the CSTG Arena. As always, keep growing out there.